It's January the 22nd, 2014. Worcester, an icy wasteland. But in here, inside Brendan's car, it's 508, a show about Worcester.
How's it going?
Good. I can't really see you. We need to move.
Really?
We need to somehow get you out of the shadows.
Where's the sun coming from?
I don't know. Can you drive up about 1 foot so that you're slightly blinded?
Let's see. No better?
It doesn't really work either. Anyway.
Well, we'll just work around it.
Yeah.
How's it going? It's good, but I just realized as soon as you
forward.
turn that camera on that my car is filthy, and now
we're
I'm
not going
really embarrassed.
We're not going to show that part of the car.
Okay.
This is a show. People may not be able to see me.
Can't see
either.
anything anyways.
This is a show where we talk about Worcester every week.
This is audio about Worcester.
This is a show in which shadowy hooded figures talk about the city of Worcester. This is our first show of 2014. Very excited to be kicking off a new year.
You just said every week, by the way, too, which is ridiculous because we haven't seen each other since I think October.
It's a New Year's resolution.
We'll starting fresh.
New Year's resolution.
No.
This is my favorite show of the year, the first show of the year, every year, because it's the show where we talk about ubiquitous surveillance. That is Pulse Magazine's Ones to Watch list. Actually, they don't call it Ones to Watch this year. They just call it 14 to Watch in 2014. And we're going to go through...
I think they're still just trying to find their sweet
This
spot
list.
there because, years ago it seemed to match up with, like, ages and whatnot, like the cutoff points and what.
They had, like, 20 under 20, 30 under 30.
Now I think the numbers are too high, but the numbers are also getting smaller. It doesn't...
Well, first of all, the most obvious thing about this year's issue is that all of these people really seem to be in the same room. Like, in the past, they would sort of Photoshop people so that they seem to be in the same room.
Yeah.
But this year, they're all in the same room, so that's exciting. That's kind of like a good little convention, actually, right there.
Well, it's a reflection on the economy and the times. They're actually all squatting together because they can't afford rent on their own.
Well, let's go on and see who these great people are. Many years in the past, we were excited about this list because it was panelists on this show who were on the list, but maybe just because the show is not as... we're just not taping as often as we used to.
Or we could just be old and out of touch.
We're no longer... Nope, nobody's watching us anymore. Adam Reed Roseanne, who is Director of Audience Engagement at the Worcester Art Museum, is on the list. This guy, I'm hoping we can interview somebody from the Art Museum very soon. Maybe it could be this guy.
Guy with a pocket square. You have a pocket square. He has a pocket square. Yeah. I think that's a place.
This dude looks incredible. Let's just say number one, best dressed man of this whole list. Look at that. That's amazing.
Looks like an interesting guy.
Here is Alana Gordon, who is a photographer. I don't know her. Here's Amanda Reek, who is a communication specialist for the city. She's also on the secretary for the Department of Transitional Assistance Worcester Advisory Board and a board member of the Worcester State University Alumni Board and Destination Worcester. You know what? I'm going to say a comment here, but we'll just keep working through things. Here's Barbara Zurillo. She's an organizer of the Worcester Young Professionals Women's Group and the Young Professional Lesbians of Worcester. Pretty cool. She's actually like a cousin of my friend.
Really?
I never met her, though. Yeah, but she's out there organizing stuff. It sort of reminds me of the air spray stuff that's been going on recently. There's been Heather Mangione and some other people have been trying to organize like a series of like queer events in Worcester that are like fun and open and also accessible to like young professionals, as opposed to some other demographic. Just like targeting especially that demographic. And it sounds like Barbara Zurillo is also on that beat. We have Crystal Byron, who's an artist and a creator of Things to Do in Central Mass. We have Dan DiRoberto, who is a real estate agent. And here's where I'm going to say, this is where I'm going to pick a bone to pick, not with Dan DiRoberto, who I'm sure is awesome and definitely is one to watch, but with this list, which is that like, I feel like a real estate in 2014. If you're doing something awesome in real estate in 2014, I would love to know like what are the details of that. It just seems like such a crazy industry nowadays. But it's not really hinted at in the blurb. Part of it, I think, is because, the way these blurbs work is like, you email back and forth a little with the reporter. It's not, nobody's spending hundreds of hours on these.
Right.
But, I don't know, Brendan, like all of these people, I feel like are doing awesome, amazing things which are just not even hinted at in their blurbs.
Well, maybe we should go through this and start bringing people on the show and flesh them out a little bit more.
This is our guest list.
This is our guest list for the new
year.
This
is our to-do list.
Thanks for doing our work for us there at Pulse Magazine.
To do. 14 to do in 2014. Yeah, I don't know. There is like a lot of awesome stuff going on in Worcester. I'm always reminded of this, and it's always like it feels like it's being intentionally hidden from me.
It's all intentionally from you. Everybody else is
Everybody else knows about this. We have Jamal Dockery and Matthew Weeks, who are fashion designers. They have a website, and as with many people with websites, it's turned into like a clothing manufacturing project for them. James Keys, musician James Keys. You were talking about James Keys.
Big fan of James Keys, yeah. I had a lot of fun playing with the Numbskulls when I was involved with the local music scene and whatnot, and I remember when he started doing his solo stuff. It was always a great time, yeah.
It's great to see musicians in here. Lauren Monroe, I would say Lauren Monroe, I want to describe her as a friend of the show. I don't know that she's actually watched the show, but she definitely could be a friend of the show. She does a thing called the Think Tank.
What is the Think Tank?
Well, they have a description here. I'll tell you my understanding of what the Think Tank does, is that the Think Tank is like a resource for people who are like homeschooling their kids, or the kids are otherwise in some sort of alternate education system, that you can just like go to a place and like learn some stuff. For example, they have partnerships with Ecotarium, the Worcester Center for Crafts. Think Tank kids have learned about 3D printing. That it's just like a place for kids who are doing some other thing with their schooling to go and like learn from like people who know what's going on.
Pretty cool.
And Lauren is a great lady. I'm 100% interested in getting Lauren on the show.
I support that.
I support it too. Good job, Lauren. Matthew Foster, owner of the Foster Gallery. Moses Dixon, legislative aide to State Rep Mary Keefe.
Also a big fan of Moses. Congratulations.
He's got a Worcester pin on. Is that a Worcester pin?
Or is that a State House pin? I don't know. It looks like a heart, doesn't it?
If that's a Worcester pin, I support that pin 100%. If it's a State House pin, it's a little tacky. Nima Hakim, who's the president of the Worcester Student Government Association. This is another guy who I'm sure, like, it doesn't really hint what he's doing besides that, like, he's like, the co-student president of Holy Cross in this article. I'm sure Nima Hakim is doing amazing stuff. Anyways. R.J. Linton, the project director of WPI's Atlas team. This is a roboticist, a graduate student roboticist. Talking about doing robot stuff with DARPA. This is a guy where, like, obviously everything he's doing is awesome. I just want this to be animated. Like, I want to see this robot, like, whatever it does, crushing a car.
I love robotics. My son is fascinated with the idea of going to WPI after going to a summer camp there and just seeing all the robots that they've got in various stages of development there. But I can't help but see any of these people and just start thinking of the Terminator. You're talking
about these people, or are you talking about the idea of robots in general?
No, their robots don't bother me. It's all the work that they're putting into robots that bother me, because, I mean, that's the whole storyline of the Terminator. I mean, it's
Skynet.
The whole Skynet thing, and I mean, in theory, we're supposed to be looking for these folks to take them out early, so that their research can't come to fruition and be the end of humanity.
I'm so excited. I'll be so excited.
We should bring him on the show.
When he's on the show.
We have to talk through this with him.
Where is he on the list? He looks like he's about number 13 on the list, so we'll probably get to him.
Because he's probably just a great guy that's trying to figure out a more convenient way to have like a cup of coffee made with like zero human input, right? But I mean,
this robot, for people can't really see.
Grew up with the Terminator.
This robot absolutely looks like it has a metal skeleton on the outside. This robot is not a coffee robot. Finally, we have Shelley Ashton Briggs, the owner of Pathways to Wellness in Worcester, Massachusetts. Is it in Worcester? Sometimes they have people from other cities in here. Yeah, I think it's in Worcester.
Any indication as to what they do?
They are a small private practice in mental health counseling, and a group practice which also includes mental health counseling and wellness services. You can also do things like massage therapy, reflexology, and Reiki there. I bet I know a lot of people in common with this lady. I don't know. We also have an update on Dan Donahue, who's now a state rep. This is the sad thing about who was on the list last year. This is the sad thing about this list.
2 years ago, 2012.
Maybe he was from 2 years ago. This is the 2014 list. Anyway, that's how it plays out. You know, people get on this list and then their life falls apart. Squandered potential.
Sorry, it didn't work out for you, Dan.
What are you gonna do, man? Anyways, there's the Pulse magazine. What do you think, Brent?
I'm looking forward to watching them all year long.
As a proud alumnus of the One to Watch list?
No, it's still there. There's the list.
It is still there, and I'm glad we can talk about it. We don't talk about the Pulse too much on this thing. I want to talk a little bit about more press criticism. In this case, the cover of a Worcester magazine, and I really feel like Worcester magazine has been like on the upswing. This is my opinion. I know this is controversial. Some people are always like, that magazine's terrible. Some people are like, that magazine is somehow freshly terrible. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's been on the upswing. But then I come back from my holidays, and what do I see on the cover but this cover? Mike O'Brien, the man behind the suit. This just seems so misguided, because if there's any part of this man's personal appearance that's famous, First of all, he did quit, so why was this even here? But second of all, like, this man's hair is legendary. I mean, this has been the number one, I think, observation in replacing the city manager has been you got to get a man with outstanding hair like Mike O'Brien. Yet, it's Mike O'Brien, the man behind the suit. Who cares? This is like saying Jimmy Durante, the man behind the ears.
Yeah, nobody noticed the suit. That was...
Anyway,
he's not even wearing a suit in that picture. He's wearing a peacoat.
I just hate this color. It's true. He's wearing a peacoat over a sweater, a V-neck sweater. Is he wearing a suit between?
And his tie's crooked. I mean, this is...
Oh, you know what, though? He's just like...
It's very relaxed, but if you're trying to make a statement about, fashion and nothing that you're actually referring to in terms of fashion is even in the picture that you have.
Anyway, it is the worst Worcester Magazine cover of all time. So that's out of the way. They got that one out of the way.
So what aspects of Worcester Magazine are you enjoying these days? Because I haven't read it in a while, I'll be honest with you.
I feel like I'm seeing articles in there that I'm glad I read.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm seeing articles in there that are giving me insight.
Okay.
I feel like I can flip open Worcester Magazine and just like check in with what's going on. Whenever I am coming up with these city council emails that I'm trying to write on a weekly basis, describing what's going on in the city council meeting, what happened the last time, what's coming up.
Yeah.
Their summaries are often the most helpful summaries.
Interesting. I've got nothing negative to say about Worcester Magazine, but it fell into a category back in the fall, late summer, early fall, where I started whittling down all the media that I was taking in, and I've gotten rid of my Twitter account. There's very little social networking stuff, and even on a local level, certain media just stopped reading. Like, I wanted to see, like, if I just stop using this thing, is my life, is it the world going to end? And oddly enough, it hasn't. Things are still going. But now I'm concerned that I'm actually missing something.
Do you read the TNG?
Religiously, yeah.
Okay.
But let me rephrase that. I don't really read the TNG. I scan headlines because rarely is there anything that I find if I get to the final period that I feel as though I learned anything more than I could have just gathered from the headline. And that's not necessarily a slam on the Telegram. It's just, their headlines are great. So well written.
I have to say, I think just because of holiday travel, at this point I have not been to their website in a month.
Okay.
And I don't think I've read the physical TNG in a month. And I just asked myself, do I feel disconnected from civic events? I don't, in part because things like Facebook and a few local blogs, I think are enough to be like, well, here's an issue. Here's what's going on with the ACLU panhandling suit or whatever. You see the headline on Facebook. You see the comments on Facebook. You kind of get the idea of where it's at. Or people are emailing you. Your neighbors are emailing you about what's going on in town.
Well, that's kind of what I mean. Is I find as though if I don't read, like, say, Worcester Magazine, and again, not a knock on Worcester Magazine, it's just kind of been a little experiment of my own. I find that people will very, very quickly tell me anything that I missed, just out of habit, and it saves me the time of actually trying to find the things that interest me within the paper. But I don't know.
I want to bring up Nassim Taleb because it's been almost 13 minutes of our shows of 2014. We haven't talked about Nassim Taleb. Have you ever read his advice on news gathering?
No, I don't think so.
This is like one of his insights, and this is a guy who's an intellectual on the international stage, and like in some ways really has to know what's going on. But he believes that newspapers and news magazines in general are a terrible filter for what an informed, thoughtful person should be thinking about and knowing about that day.
Okay.
And his advice is that you should go to a lot of parties, or if you're an introvert, your spouse should go to a lot of parties on your behalf. And you should talk to people at parties. This is a similar rubric to Facebook, although I think he doesn't like Facebook for this, which is that if you go to parties and you talk to people, and the people at these parties are like exciting, dynamic people, they're all reading the newspaper, and they're going to filter out for you what is going on. Okay. And then you can have that conversation. And occasionally, you're going to want to know more about what's going on. Like, there's going to be a new city manager, and you're going to want to read, like, something about him. But not just like, oh, there's a new city manager. You're going to want to read some in-depth, 5,000-word bio on Ed Augustus or whatever.
You don't want to read 20 lead-up columns that are all opinion pieces about what might happen hypothetically over the next couple of years. So
or a lot of times it's what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, is Ed Augustus going to be the city manager tomorrow? There's so many articles like, well, he's going to do it next week. Well, he's not going to do it. He's going to accept it. He's not going to accept it. And like, if your business obviously is impacted by the identity of the city manager to the extent that you need to know whether he's going to do it, and definitely even what the speculation is like on a 24-hour-a-day basis, then by all means follow that. If you're a stock trader, follow the news of the stocks you're trading. But if you're not a stock trader, you don't care what the Dow is doing today. It's completely irrelevant to you what it's doing today, and you want to avoid any news like that because it's just going to freak you out. The same way, if you care about city policy, honestly, it matters whether Ed Augustus is city manager or not, but the speculation about that doesn't matter.
Right. Well, and I think in a way that's very similar to what I've been doing over the last couple months, is just kind of ignoring press and instead talking to people that are, kind of behind the scenes in many regards when it comes to press, right? So, like, if your interests are politics, talk to people that are working within politics and whatnot. You're going to see the same stories in the paper that you have as a part of regular conversation, but that regular conversation oftentimes leads to the stories between the stories and whatnot that you don't necessarily get within a newspaper.
I think I'm going to link to this article that was in The Guardian last year. That was a great article about why you shouldn't read the news. I think it's actually by a guy who Nassim Taleb has now made his arch nemesis because he feels like the guy plagiarized him a little bit, although at some point they were friends. There's a lot of backstory there. Doesn't matter. I want to link to this in the show notes for people who want to find out this counter argument for why you shouldn't follow the news. I'll give you, you know what? This is a very self-serving argument, because you know what would be a great way for a person who feels like they go to parties where people are talking about interesting things but not boring stuff like Worcester City politics. You know what would be a dynamic way, entertaining way, hilarious way, witty way for them to find out about what they should be thinking about and knowing about Worcester on a weekly basis?
What's that?
508 show.
508 would be a great way to do that. No, but I like the thought process, though. I mean, because as someone who hasn't done, like, say, Facebook for years, right? I really never had a Facebook account. There's no question that I miss all sorts of sort of banter and whatnot, even amongst people I know and people I don't know that I probably would be interested in. But at the end of the day, I still don't feel as though I'm actually missing anything except for banter that I can totally live without. I'm actually spending more time talking to actual people and whatnot face to face that I think adds more context to life overall, as opposed to just tidbits from folks that are kind of passing throughout the day and whatnot.
I think it's true. I
could be wrong, though.
I think it's true. I definitely had a good experience using Facebook over the holidays, just because I would check it once a day or once every other day for about 15 seconds. And let me tell you, the Facebook relevance algorithm, so good. It would be like, if my friends had lost power, that would be the top thing on my phone.
Right.
I would know that my friends had lost power. I could email with them. Everything else.
But doesn't it go back, and we've talked about this before, doesn't it go back to the sort of influence bubble thing? Like, where really you're only knowing about your friends losing power and whatnot, and there might actually be a million other things going on in the world that you're not getting you're not seeing, because it is too easy just to focus on the things that are known that you'll be interested in.
This is exactly true. And this is why, in some ways, I feel like you or I actually should not be telling people that we don't read the newspaper as much as we should. Although you read it religiously, so I don't need to read it religiously.
Yeah, and I mean,
I want to read Worcester Magazine religiously,
and specifically about the Telegram. I mean, there are other newspapers that I read, long form and whatnot. I mean, the Telegram, I think I can just get by mostly with the headlines. That sounds awful, but let's move on.
All right, this is enough. What do you? So we got a new city council. We got who's new on the city council this year? Gary Rosen.
We got Rosen. We got
We got
Mo Bergman.
Mo Bergman is on the council, and
our friend who
Mike Gaffney is on the council. And other than knowing that they're by Facebook, other than knowing that there's a lot of people who are already outraged by Gary Rosen and his attitude,
what did he do?
He was just being Gary Rosen.
No.
Just being like weirdly. We can get into it another show. I'll prepare another show. We can critique Gary Rosen's performance on the council so far.
And we get a new city manager.
We get a new city manager, a new temporary city manager.
Temporary city manager.
Whatever you want to call it. Somebody's going to be city manager for a while, but not forever.
If Steve Quist has his way, it'll be at Augustus for all eternity.
Well, there you go. Anyway, in some ways it feels like a very similar Worcester to Worcesters of past years, in that, like, City Square, it's coming. It's moving ahead.
Any minute now. I don't think that much changed. But I don't know that much is supposed to change. Like, it's funny, as soon as Mike O'Brien left, and I think we've also, has Bob Moylan also officially departed? I think he did at the beginning of the year.
I think he did. This would be the head of the Public Works department.
Like at the beginning, right as soon as the new year came around and these two guys were sort of out of the picture, that's when I started driving around, just seeing if, like, there were worse potholes, like, immediately, right? It's not really how the city works, right? The wheels aren't going to fall off the bus immediately. Not much has changed from the end of the year, even though there's new people on board, but it'll be a while before you actually see any impact, which is upsetting in some way. In some way, you wish that, like, a big hammer would just come down and you would know right out of the gate, what the changes are going to be. But potholes,
I don't know.
They're still there too.
What do you want to do on this show this year? Or what do you want to talk about on the show this year?
We got a long list of people that we need to interview. There's like 14 of them.
Yeah.
How many shows do we have?
We'll probably do 14.
52,
we might do 14 shows this year. Sure. It's possible.
What else?
Boy, Boy, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of news that's going on, but as far as like, if we're only going to be talking once a month, I'm not really sure what is there that's like
We
the
can talk more
winter,
than once a
like
month.
what's like the winter news story. I don't know that there is a winter news story. You know, something that people need to know about, that people need to be aware of. You know, I mean, I feel like there's always stuff bubbling up. There's stuff bubbling up around, you know, panhandling and the city's lawsuit over whether its panhandling ordinance is going to stand.
Mhm.
There's stuff bubbling up around renewed attempts to get payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, you know, that actually made the state press today. It was the Master List, which is one of the bigger sort of mailing lists that targets politicians and whatnot, so they
Yes.
can kind of be on top of things that are going on throughout the day. They picked up on the Telegram story about Pilot making a resurgence here in Worcester. It's just a really grim thing, you know. It's like, how many times do we have to rehash the same old arguments over and over again? It's like, we might as well just go back and bring up fluoride again, just to annoy people into oblivion.
Well, you know, I've been thinking though, this idea of like we need to like get a little bit of money out of the colleges, and honestly, in the big picture, like here's the deal about Pilot people: payment in lieu of taxes from the local colleges. The local colleges give the city a little bit of money. We're talking about a couple $1 million a year total from everybody who's making Pilot payments right now.
Well, I mean, and never mind just the influx of cash from students and what have you.
Well, but anyway, they give this little extra payment to the city, but what they get, what they have gotten so far, as an exchange for this, is like all of the land deals that they want to go through around their colleges have gone through.
Oh, sure.
So it's really it's payment for land deals as well as in lieu of taxes.
Yeah.
So, and it's not a lot of money in the big picture. So, but there's now a renewed push, as there is several times a year, a renewed push to try to get more money out of colleges and other sorts of organizations that don't
And
like.
you and I have been having this conversation, I think, literally since we started doing the show together. And it's just such a cynical sort of conversation to have, right? I mean,
But I'll tell you, I mean, when we first started having it on this, I used to always call it Bilet because it was, you know, it was bull in lieu of taxes, and not because there was no payments happening for many years. But now there's payments happening.
Yeah.
I kind of think I want to reframe this as actually a visionary move, and you know why? Who are we talking about? Basically shaking down. Mostly, we're not talking about churches. I don't think anybody has the guts to do that.
but we should.
Well,
that would be fun.
Well, that would be a very interesting angle on it,
Yeah.
but nobody's talking about that. We're talking about the colleges.
Sure.
And why do the colleges have this, are in this enviable financial position? Higher education bubble. That's what I'm going to say. This higher education bubble, people talk about how it's going to pop any year now. If it does pop, people are going to wish they had shaken down the colleges when they had the chance.
Shaking them down sooner. Maybe so, but you know, at the same time, I mean, it's very easy to look at like Maine South, and it wasn't too long ago that we were begging Clark University to reinvest in the neighborhood down there, buy up all these abandoned properties that were just rotting and what have you, as Maine South kind of came out of a really terrible 70s into a not so great 80s, and came into the 90s really not looking any better than it started in the 70s.
As people said of Worcester, the Port-au-Prince of the 90s.
Exactly. They turned around and they bought everything down in Maine South. I mean, and the neighborhoods look great down there, primarily because of the investment that Clark University kicked off, and it became a catalyst for other people to reinvest in their properties. I mean, the that alone is worth the keeping them around, right? I mean, they've done their part in terms of being a good community neighbor. If they hadn't done that, it's arguable that maybe it's not even up for argument that Maine South would have burnt down by now. It looked like Detroit. Nobody was showing any interest in investing in Maine South Worcester until Clark University kicked that ball off. Does that make it okay for them to be hoarding massive amounts of cash? No, but that's like a national conversation. That's way above the pay grade of Worcester. And it's always struck me as odd that this is one of those places where Worcester wants to get involved in a conversation that really is a much bigger national conversation about endowments and hoarding cash within the not-for-profit sector, when so often the Worcester City Council is so spineless it's not willing to even acknowledge national issues that do affect local residents and whatnot. I mean, in Arizona a couple years ago, there's been no shortage of divestment conversations that have taken place.
Right.
Not the purview of the Worcester City Council. When it comes to just like scraping money away from people that they're not entitled to that money from legally, then suddenly it's within their purview. It's awful.
Is there a better way that we can collect the money for city government than property taxes? Are property taxes the smartest way? Because it just, there's a lot of money involved.
Of course not. I mean, our entire system of taxation is nonsense because there's nothing progressive about it. But of course, as soon as you use the word progressive in anything resembling a conversation about politics, people instantly assume that you're making a left-right dichotomy sort of argument, and the conversation ends. But I mean, the idea of actually having various tiers of taxation based on income and earnings and what have you, that would make sense. I mean, just because someone owns a house doesn't mean they're necessarily wealthy, right? But you're taxed at the exact same rate as everybody else. And we also get to see what's amazing now with places like Shrewsbury, that the counter argument that you should be keeping taxes low and flat and whatnot, that only scales so far too. I mean, Shrewsbury, for all intent and purposes, is now bankrupt because they've realized that they can't develop anymore. So their low commercial tax rate now means nothing because there's no more growth involved. But the people that they do have still expect the same level of services. So now they've got to find a way to provide services with a relatively stagnant influx of cash from their flat tax across the board. That's also a no-win situation. The whole thing needs an overhaul, is what it is, but we don't have the political will to do that across the board in the Commonwealth.
What, is like income tax the way to do it, or what do you think's the?
Income tax is probably the way to start, and I mean, I think it's a lot of that would involve an overhaul of our both federal and state tax level rates for income to ensure that you're taxing people appropriately. But
yeah, it seems insane how much we wring our hands around property use in the city just because of the tax implication. And the tax implication is big. So I understand why things like assessments and whatever, people really care about that because it really impacts like their pocketbook. But it's just like, why are we spending so much time trying to decide exactly how much your property is worth theoretically? Like, not how much someone wants to buy it for, but how much it needs to be worth theoretically so that we can tax you. Or do people put out these maps of like, here's the different non-tax-paying owners of land in the city. It's the state owns this land, the city owns this land, churches own this land, nonprofits own this land, college owns this land. Like, why do we care on that perspective whether it's a nonprofit or not? Like, that we should feel like, oh, well, you should own less land or something. Like, it's only because of the tax implications. And that these are these weird, unexpected, or maybe expected, like, impacts of making our entire city tax system based on land use.
Yeah.
Like, it does seem like income would be simpler just because, I mean, income is already is its own collection of nightmares, but it's like already a collection of nightmares which are like having to be done on the federal level.
Yeah, and of course maybe you can figure in things like property in terms of assets that would somehow be a part of an income conversation, but I mean that's different as well too. I mean, but the bigger issue is that the way we do things in Worcester is it's easy to identify a budget, and then your property value year to year is really nothing more than the convenient number that to be decided on to back that assessment into a budget. Which is because the budget's known and the assessments are unknown until the budget is known. If the budget was suddenly, astronomically higher, all of our assessments would suddenly be astronomically higher because you need that revenue to back into the budget. It's just an inherently broken system, but it's also an insanely complicated system, one that I don't claim to fully understand. Way above my pay grade, and I'm sure yours too. But that's part of why it needs a complete overhaul. Is because nobody really knows how the system functions from a local to a state to a federal level in a way that's meaningful to everybody.
Did you co-host that episode where we interviewed Virginia Ryan a few years ago?
I believe so. It was over at the pond, wasn't it?
That was great. I want to have her back on to talk about housing assessments.
Sure.
I always get these great emails from her about housing assessments. I still don't understand it, but I'm kind of fascinated.
Well, and of course, that's, I think, the place where we really do a disservice is, in a weird way, almost attacking folks with a fixed income, right? Because the Social Security Administration on the federal level doesn't really care what Worcester's home assessments are when it comes to your ability to pay taxes.
Right.
So you could be in your home for 50 years, but, the relationship between your fixed income from Social Security on the local level isn't necessarily going to marry up, as well as people with like kids and whatnot. It's always sort of unexpected costs that come into play and what have you. It's I don't know. We should have that conversation sometime this year.
I'm excited about 2014.
Along with radio towers. We need to talk about radio towers.
Contrails. We're definitely going to have a special Contrails episode. This is Brendan Melican. I'm Michael Benedetti, and this is Elm Park. Thank you for watching The Five Boys Show. We will talk to you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.